Welcome to Bible Prayers and Untold Stories, where every whisper verse is truth, and every story brings light to the soul. Let us journey through the sacred words and uncover the wisdom hidden in prayer. St. Peter's Square, gray sky, calm wind. A thin wisp of smoke from the Sistine chimney slowly dissipates in the wind. The camera pans slowly from the dome down to the waiting square. The hour has come. The Vatican clock strikes noon. Not a second late, not a beat early. The bell rings, piercing through marble and centuries. But beneath that bell, there is a silence that is not human, but of the sacred holding itself back. The door opens. A figure appears. Pope Leo XIV. No greeting, no blessing. Just standing still. When he appears, the world lifts its head. But he does not look down. He does not smile. He does not speak. For the truth he carries cannot be spoken. And in the dark stone of the basilica's pillars, there is a witness. He was once a brother, once a soulmate, but now only a witness of something unfinished. The gazes of Leo XIV and Cardinal Tagle met. A gaze that seemed to carry the burden of salvation yet to be formed. This is not a story of thrones and crowns, but a story of the silence of a saint, carrying a revelation that the world was not ready to hear. A story not written in blood or sword, but in tears and the remaining light, in the dark night of faith. The last words of a pope, based on the unpublished diaries of Leo XIV, falls down from above on the square like the eye of God. The wind blows gently. The gray clouds drift slowly. People are looking up, silent. The church bells ring out, deep, long, as if echoing from nothing. 12 chimes, not a beat too far, not a moment too short. The sound of order, the symbol of eternity. But at last there was a silence, not the silence of peace, but the silence of something that was about to be revealed. But there was not enough time to say it. Vatican balcony. The ancient wooden door opens. A white figure appears. Pope Leo XIV, Robert. He does not smile. He does not wave. He does not bless. He just stands there like a living statue, but his eyes are not looking down. He is listening to something far beyond the crowd. The whole square. Then a close-up of Pope Leo XIV's eyes. Deep, tired, full of sacred repression. He did not come to be praised. He did not come to speak or to bless. He just stood there, as if listening to a call that only he could hear, perhaps from heaven, perhaps from a soul demanding an answer that the world did not want to hear. Tagle whispering inwardly, "Why today?" After so many years, after so much silence, why does his gaze still carry an unnamed sadness? From the balcony, Robert's eyes met Tagle's in the crowd. No one spoke, but something passed through that space, something sacred and melancholy. Between them, there was no quarrel. There was no parting. Only a word spoken, then buried deep in silence. The world calls it a mystery, but Tagle calls it an unfinished thing. Robert and Tagle celebrated Mass together in a simple chapel, sat together at the bedside of a sick child, sharing bread in silence, a brotherhood without words. They had prayed with tears. They had listened together to the sighs of the one whose name no one remembered. But since the day the white smoke rose into the Sistine, that holiness has been covered by a cloak and an unspeakable thing. Pope Leo XIV turned away silently. The door closed behind him. The crowd still applauded, but no one recognized him. He never waved. We expected a pope to speak, but he chose silence. For sometimes silence is the beginning of prophecy. Robert walked barefoot through the mud. A naked child ran after him, calling Padre. He turned, bent down, and took the child in his arms. Before he was called His Holiness, he was just Robert. No red hat, no gold ring, just a priest, living among the mud, and the night cries of those whose names no one remembered. Robert lives in a leaky hut. No fans, no windows. He helps bury a mother who died of malaria, teaches children to pray, shares a meager loaf of bread with a drunken church. Montage, soft strings in the background. He sleeps on the dirt floor. kneels by the dying by candlelight, writes a prayer on a rain-soaked notebook. Lord, how can we shepherd when the sheep no longer trust in grass? How can we obey when the Holy Spirit whispers something else? Tagle reads an old, faded letter. The image shifts to Robert writing the letter by hand, oil lamplight, wind. Reading of the letter, Robert's voice. Brother Teo, today I washed the feet of a leper. He has no name, only El Silencio, the silence. I think perhaps I understand a little why God has not spoken yet. Tagle closes the letter, silently looking out the window. His eyes are wet. Robert and Tagle sit in the monastery dining room. Neither speaks, sharing the dry bread and the cup of sacramental wine. Robert, I am not the best. I am just the one who stays when others have left. Their eyes meet. Tagle wants to say something, but cannot. There are no words to be said, for there are sacred things that can only be heard by presence. Robert, now dressed in white, walks down the Vatican corridors. Each step seems to drain his strength. He holds a letter from Tagle, reads it, then folds it, does not reply. The letters that follow, unopened, piled up like dust. He looks out the large glass window, where before the empty sky of Peru was from one who stayed. He became one who was left behind, not because anyone turned away, but because the burden of what only he knew was too great to share. Tagle in his study, lighting a small candle. On the table were letters that had never been answered. Tagle whispering, "Do you still have the old Bible, or did they give you a gilded one?" The wind blows. The candle tilts but does not go out. There are questions that do not need answers. Only the listener is still alive. Ancient monastery on a high hill. Dark, light rain, wind whistling through the wooden window, an oil lamp flickering from a small window. They chose this place for oblivion. No nameplate, no mass, no ritual. There was only the cliff, the night wind, and two souls touching, like two lost notes in a broken sheet. Robert entered the room. He looked older, thinner, and lighter, as if a part of his soul had been dissolved into the ashes. Tagle was already sitting by the window, not standing, not speaking, just a slight nod, no speech, just the sound of rain, the creaking of wood, the crackling of the fire in the fireplace. They sat across from each other, separated by a small wooden table. Nothing between them, except memories. Robert, finally speaking, as if from the deepest part of his soul. I saw altars cracked, not because of war, but because no one knelt beneath them. I saw priests blessing empty pews. I saw children walking through the church as if it were a ruin, and I heard the silence in the confessional. Pause. I thought being Pope meant leading. But what if I was chosen only to witness the end? Tagle swallows. His eyes fill with tears, but he doesn't speak. Robert continues, almost confessing. I did not hear him calling my name. In my dreams, I saw him calling the names of the poor, the refugees, the beggars, but not me. And I cried, not because I was forgotten, but because I realized I was not needed for that plan. The two men sat silently in the old stone room. No one said anything more. The light was dim. The fire was still burning. The wind outside was still howling. Not heresy, not doubt, but a kind of holiness that transcended the boundaries of words. A self-destruction for love, not the love that is proclaimed, but the love that endures its own brokenness, so that the world may be whole. Tagle was left alone after Robert left the room. He lit a candle. He placed his notebook on the table. Tagle, inner monologue. He did not fall. He was only stepping down into a place where no one dared to tread, to take on the spiritual corruption that the church dares not look upon. He opens his notebook, full of notes, diaries, unfinished prayers. Not all truths should be preached from the pulpit. There are prophecies that can only be whispered between two souls, in a room without a name, a night without a moon, and a pope without a throne. St. Peter's Square is crowded. The light of noon, the sound of cheers. The camera pans to the balcony, where Pope Leo XIV appears again, but different. His eyes are empty, His hands are not raised. He does not bless. He does not look at anyone. The people are still cheering, but he can no longer hear them. Sometimes, returning is also a form of being lost, for Rome is no longer home. When the soul has grown accustomed to living in the midst of the wound, Robert celebrates the Massachusetts outside. There is a halo. But inside, there is a slight tremor in his hand as he lifts a host. At times, he pauses, his eyes closed, as if to keep himself from breaking. Robert's inner voice. He is still present in the bread and wine, but I no longer feel him as I did when I knelt by the sickbed, where an old woman was dying, her hands trembling as she made the sign of the cross. Now, the ritual is complete. The candles are in order, but the presence is absent. Robert meets the seminarians. They are respectful, bow their heads, asking for instruction. But when they talk about rules, about the structure of the church, he just smiles sadly. Robert, thinking, what are they asking me? I once taught a child to spell mercy in the mud, but now I can only keep silent, because the deepest things cannot be taught by textbooks. In his room, Tagle opens a thick manuscript, the handwriting mixed with Latin and Spanish. A passage makes him pause, his hand faltering. Robert's voiceover. I dreamed of Peter's boat not sinking, but drifting. The sails were still full of wind, but the rudder was broken. And Christ stood on the shore, not crying, not angry. He just waited, as if he had grown accustomed to being forgotten. Tagle closes the book. His hands shake. He kneels. He says nothing. Robert enters his room. No entourage. No formalities. He sits by the window, looking out at the night sky. Not a single star. In his hands, a piece of bread, an old Bible, the cover worn. Inner voice. Some people think power is a burden. But no, power is a cloak. The burden is when you see what is broken and know that no one will believe you if you tell. Tagle writes, crosses out, rewrites. He looks at the flickering altar lamp. Inner voice. If I tell, I betray the sacred silence. If I keep it secret, I betray those who need to know the truth to keep the faith. Faithfulness, is it silence, or is it speaking out in tears? Pope Leo XIV walks down the long corridor. No cardinals, no ceremony. He just walks silently. His hands finger the rosary. His eyes do not shed tears, but his steps grow heavier. Not everyone who carries the cross is seen as a sacrifice. There are those who carry the cross in silence, not to be remembered, but to keep others from losing their faith. The stone room was small and simple. No gold, no relics, only the faint light from the window. Leo XIV sat on the floor, his back against the wall. His hand held a piece of faded paper. When the sacred no longer needs to be proven, it chooses to hide itself, like a fire smoldering under the ashes, like a saint passing through this world without leaving a sound of footsteps. Montage of Leo XIV hands, washing the feet of a leper, holding the hand of an unknown child, covering his face and crying during Mass, trembling while raising the host, and now just gently clasping in prayer. Inner voice. I do not ask to see the results. Just keep the truth, even if no one understands. Tagle opens a wooden box hidden behind the old altar for the first time. Inside is a stack of papers tied with old rope. No labels, no marks. Robert's voiceover. If one day no one comes to the altar anymore, just light the candles. If no one goes to confession anymore, just sit there as if they will come back, because God does not leave. He only waits, in the silence deeper than any bell. Tagle shares what Robert left behind, not to condemn, not to proclaim, but for those who remain, we can pray together. An old cardinal whispers after a moment of silence. We do not pray for the Pope, but for that man. He buried himself so that others may stand. Tagle goes alone to Robert's room. He has left. No one has told him. No one has prepared. No funeral. Only a piece of tablecloth with an unused host on it. Tagle kneels. No tears. No words. Just a slow, deep, sacred breath. There's some holy things that are not written on stone walls, only carved on the heart, not in words, but in a presence that has passed by, lightly, very lightly, but never fading. Tagle's voiceover, last words written in a notebook. I no longer write letters to Robert, but I still light candles. Because sometimes prayers don't need to be sent, just kept in silence. A boy enters the empty chapel, sits down quietly, picks up an old Bible from the pulpit, opens it, and reads the first lines of an unfinished prayer. The camera stops on the faded words on the cover. To Robert, the unknown servant of mercy. The church does not die when its enemies come. The church dies only when its friends fall asleep. From the unpublished diary of Leo XIV.